Hey lovelies, welcome to my labor and delivery video. I am finally sitting down and I'm gonna go through everything from top to bottom in regards to how I got to my labor and delivery. You guys are gonna see actual vlog footage of my labor and delivery, and then towards the end when I wasn't able to continue filming, I'm gonna then kind of sit down style video, explain everything that happened finally again in my second labor and delivery ever. I am officially almost 5 weeks pregnant, and whoa, scratch that. I need to full on focus because that is mom brain at its finest. I am not pregnant. I am almost 5 weeks postpartum. I'm 5 weeks postpartum tomorrow. You guys just saw that I posted my what's in my hospital bag video for a pandemic and what I actually used in my hospital bag. If you didn't see that video, I basically, like I said, packed my hospital bag and I talked to you guys about after the fact what I actually used, and I also give you tips on what I think is going to be necessary for any of you who are going to be giving birth during the pandemic. If you haven't seen that video and you want to watch it, I will link it up on the iCard at the top of the screen, and I will go ahead and link it for you guys down in the description box as well. So like I said, I am almost 5 weeks postpartum, and it's taken me this long to kind of sit down and discuss everything that happened because I've just been really processing it mentally. I definitely feel like this second time around, I'm not as foggy as you might say mentally as I felt like I was the first time around with my first daughter, who's almost 3 now. If you guys are new to my channel, I had a really traumatic labor and delivery experience, and because of that I feel like I had not an ideal postpartum experience either. I suffered from a lot of postpartum extreme anxiety, I would say, some postpartum OCD. I remember being like afraid to leave the house. It was just very overwhelming, so much so that like I didn't leave my house for weeks and weeks. So this time around, I definitely feel a lot healthier in that sense, but my labor and delivery this time around was so different than I expected. Literally the one thing I kind of never wanted to happen happened, and it's been a lot to kind of process all of that, if you will. So to kind of give you guys a brief explanation of how we got to my labor and delivery, I did have a scheduled induction. I was 39 weeks and I believe 39 weeks and 6 days. It was right before my due date. So I ended up actually giving birth, having my second daughter on her due date. Because of my last labor and delivery experience with my first daughter, I had a lot of PTSD that I was carrying with me, and a lot of that wasn't from just labor and delivery. It also included my time leading up to labor and delivery. So right around 37 weeks with this pregnancy, I started seeing an increase in my elevation of blood pressures again. If you guys have been following me along here on YouTube or over on my Instagram, you will know that that's something I've suffered from my entire time. Going to the office brings back a lot of emotions, and I physically can't control my blood pressure when I'm in office. So I was on a pretty strict regimen of taking my blood pressure at home and following that really heavily so that I could report the differences between at home and in office. Right around 37 weeks is when my first labor and delivery experience kind of started to go way downhill. So right around that time frame this time around as well was when you could see a huge spike in my anxiety. And of course, that's also exactly kind of the time frame that they're looking at you for things like preeclampsia. And so because of my past history, because of nobody really being able to 100% say anxiety can cause blood pressure spikes exactly like this, they were very concerned about my blood pressure in correlation to my pregnancy and also in correlation to my pre-existing risk factors to do with like my blood clotting issues and some of the things that we were following along all the way up until the end. Around that time, they really started to push induction. It wasn't as bad of a push as it was my first labor and delivery experience. I really felt like I was able to talk with the doctors this time around and really work through my own preferences and experience and reasoning. And we came to kind of a mutually agreed upon date to induce if I hadn't already gone into labor. I was being checked because I was going in like bi-weekly at my doctor's visits, and I was doing bi-weekly non-stress tests as well. I was being checked also. I was having cervical checks, and every time that happened, they were saying I was increasing in the effacement. So I was like 75% effaced and 1 centimeter dilated. So I kind of just sat at that for weeks and weeks and weeks, which was a good sign in the beginning because I didn't have any sort of progress with my first. So the fact that there was something was like a good sign to me. Nonetheless, nothing ever happened on my own. So I did agree to induce. And again, I went in at 39 weeks and 6 days. And I went in that evening. And that's where you guys will see me pick up with the vlog. Before we get into the vlog footage, I would just like to say I would love to have you guys stick around as a regular subscriber if you haven't already. So before you leave today's video, please consider hitting that red subscribe button down below. In case you're new to my channel, I am a brand new mom of 2. So I have a 3-year-old daughter, and we just welcomed our second daughter. She again is almost 5 weeks old, and it has been a transition, you could say, of realizing how much time I did actually have when I just had one child, because now I literally feel split in half, and I'm just going to continue taking you guys through that journey with me. So if any of that sounds intriguing to you, I would love to have you again subscribe before you leave today's video. Is it going?
How's it going?
Is it going?
Yes, it's going.
Welcome to the labor and delivery vlog. So Donald and I have been at the hospital now for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We got here and we had to do like a screening, which is bogus. They take your temperature, that's it. And Donald was the only one allowed in, as we already knew. And we just got like not registered, but like checked in and signed all the consent paperwork, put in my IV. I had to get my penicillin, is what they use for the antibiotic for strep B. I had to get that started, which I guess I have to do every 4 hours while I'm in labor. They hooked baby up to the monitor, and apparently I'm contracting every 3 to 5 minutes, and I didn't know that. And then what else? They did a cervical check, and the provider who checked me said I was actually almost at a 2. And then the first step, based off of like my effacement and where I was at with dilation, they went ahead with a Foley bulb. So that's what I just got, and it wasn't as horrific as it was the first time, so thank God for that. So now the nurse will come in like every hour apparently and check the Foley bulb, and I could have it in for like as little as
3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, but as much as 12 hours, which would be horrible. Because it pretty much only gets you to like a 3 or 4. And then at that point they reassess like how often my contractions are coming and what the next step is. So, do you want to do like a room tour?
Certainly. Well, we have this closet here. It's a cabinet. There's nothing in there before. Now there is. We have this nice recliner that I've been sitting in. We have our mountain of pillows, the snack corner. It's a wonderful bed that I will not be sleeping on. I'll lay on it, but I won't be sleeping.
That's such a lie.
Restroom, and then just space for other things to happen.
It is almost 1 a.m. so we've been here for
5 hours.
5-ish hours, almost 5 hours. And the Foley bolt was a success, thank God. It was only in for 2 hours and then they were able to pull it out. While I had it though, I was feeling some contractions, I would say in the first hour. And then now we're switching to Pitocin, just because my contractions aren't super close together automatically. And yeah, so I guess they bump that up every 30 minutes. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm definitely open to the epidural. But at the same time, like, if I don't feel like I need it, then why would I get it yet? So yeah, do you have anything to say?
Well, things are moving quicker than maybe anticipated, but as fast as we hoped.
Yeah, I'm like, I would prefer it to go very fast. I just finished getting my epidural finally, and the catheter that you have to get when you have an epidural, because once we started Pitocin, the baby's heart rate was dipping, and they didn't exactly know why. So we ended up breaking my water so that they could insert a contraction like monitor, some sort of catheter, into my uterus to actually monitor the contractions, because they couldn't really pick them up very well on the external monitor. And then I just felt like my contractions were getting worse, and based off of my experience, what is it?
100 over 40.
Okay, turn it off.
You were just talking about the monitor.
Yeah, once they broke my water, it was like I could feel my contractions getting worse. And just last time, I like held out on getting the epidural for so long, and I think I just put my body in more of a toll than it needed to be, just because I was trying to avoid the epidural. So before things got like unbearable, I decided to get the epidural. So that's what we just did. And I'm at a 6 now, and just waiting, I guess, at this point. My right side is so numb, like so numb. I can't feel this at all. But my left side isn't, so.
It'll work its way over there.
Hopefully.
You done?
Donald's been sleeping. Tunnel was in the corner asleep during my epidural. I just rolled him over to the corner.
I would defend myself, but I did doze off occasionally, but not during the epidural.
Occasionally.
I was front and center with my mask and hat.
Yo, why did they have you so close?
I don't know. I had a courtside seat.
That's what your insurance pays for.
Yeah.
Alright.
Alright, I'm recording now.
So it's like 1:30 and I've been at 6 centimeters for like 8 hours. I'm so tired. And I just keep getting like repositioned. We took a break from the Pitocin for like 30 minutes and then started it back up, and I've just been swapping back and forth to sides and then sitting up, and it's like I'm tired. So, and I'm also really hungry. And I'm hoping that baby is gonna come soon, sooner rather than later, because I really want her to be born today. So, but obviously that's not imperative, so, but everything's going good besides that.
All positive things.
Yeah.
I have no updates. You've been a trooper.
Okay, so the last clip that you guys saw, I talked about being at a 6 centimeter dilation for hours. I ended up being 6 centimeters, I think, for 18 hours. It was so long. I got to 6 centimeters so quickly in the scheme of things, and then I was at 6 centimeters for so long. So you're probably wondering what happened after that. So at that point, my water had been broken for 18 hours as well, or kind of right around that same time frame, because I did have my water broken before getting to 6 centimeters. And that is when you're gonna find, if you're in a similar scenario, doctors are really getting concerned about your risk factor, your risk of developing an internal infection, because your waters have been broken, and they, every time they check you, are increasing that risk of introducing something into your system that could cause an infection. So at that point, they were really heavily kind of telling me what our next steps were, and the biggest thing was a C-section. The doctor that explained why we needed to proceed with a C-section was very calm, very reassuring, very positive, and I so appreciated that, because the way she explained everything was just, this really is the logical next step and kind of where we're at because of what has happened during the induction. So because my waters had been broken, I couldn't really call this a failed induction and leave and come back another time. And looking back now, I had basically reached a point with my body where it was just fatigued. It was fatigued from being on literally the highest level of Pitocin you can go, and being on that level for so long. After we got the news about the C-section, I was so emotional. I could tell my body was physically tired. If you guys, again, have been following along with me at all here on YouTube or on my Instagram, you guys will know that the last like 6 weeks of my pregnancy, I did hardcore home renovations. We replaced flooring in like 6 different rooms. We painted rooms. We built and installed a closet insert. We did like 3 different closet makeovers. I could go on and on and on and on. It was like I had such a push for nesting at the end of my pregnancy that it just, I was so tired. And now looking back, I just wouldn't recommend that. Like I don't think that it was the deciding factor on why I ended up having to have a C-section, but I feel like I didn't rest my body like maybe I should have prior to going into an induction. And especially the days before, I knew that I was having the induction, so I was very nervous, like just overall anxious about the process happening and how it was going to go and how it was going to compare to my last experience, that I just wasn't getting the sleep that I hoped to have gotten. And overall, I could just tell my body was so tired, and it sucked. It was a sucky place to be, to feel like you physically couldn't do something. You just wonder, like, all of these what ifs, like, what if I would have, you know, done certain things? Would I have been in a better place to be able to do this labor, you know? And you also are kind of at a point when you're at a 6 centimeter dilation for so long, you're also just concerned, like, why am I not progressing like I did with my first labor and delivery? Like, what is happening? So I ended up crying, and I tried to do it like quietly, because my room was right outside the nurse's station, and I remember, like, they can hear me have this mental breakdown, which who cares? But at the time I just was like, you know, having a C-section isn't the end of the world. And, you know, I needed to remind myself to stay like strong mentally and focused. So I kind of tried to just like quietly cry. But I think my nurses knew, because they really pulled out all the stops to try to not have this turn into a C-section for me. I had nurses coming in, like flipping me into tons of different positions. I had nurses like flipping me over off the bed, rocking my body during contractions, like setting me up in a different position every 15 minutes, moving me, like, which they all had to do themselves because I was physically numb from like my waist down because of the epidural. So like I couldn't do a lot physically. So for like 3 additional hours, these nurses put in so much effort to try to get me to have progress. And it literally did nothing. It did nothing. It didn't do anything. So at that point, I had someone from anesthesiology come in and talk to me about kind of reworking the epidural so that I didn't have to have a spinal tap to have the surgery. The epidural ended up giving me quite a bit of heartache. It only numbed one half of my body. It never, like, gravity never helped it to even out. So the entire time I was in labor, I was very, 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 very numb on one side, and I could still feel contractions on the other side, which is another reason I think my body was so weak, because I never truly got a break from the epidural. I just kind of got the nasty side effects from it. And they tried to up the epidural, or I don't know exactly what they're doing. I was having reactions. My heart rate was dropping. My blood pressure was dropping. I had the feeling that I was going to pass out every time they tried to increase my epidural. I was feeling so nauseous, so dizzy. It was the worst in regards to anesthesia trying to prep me for my C-section. I remember feeling so tired, like physically so tired. And every time they were trying to get me prepared for the surgery, my body just was like telling them that it couldn't really handle much more. And that was such a scary place to be in, because when you go into surgery, you want to feel confident that you're going to come out of it. And I remember thinking, like, for a brief moment, like, is this, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it wasn't like I thought, is this the end? But it was like, is this going to be really bad? And it was really scary. Some of the other prep that they do for the C-section is they have to make sure the area where they're going to do the incision is completely clean. So they have to shave, clean it multiple times. They just have to really like make sure it's dried and cleaned off and prepped. So somebody was having to shave me, and that was kind of strange. But again, you kind of get to a point when you're in your labor where you just like all care of, you know, being covered up or embarrassment kind of goes to the wind. At least that's what happens in my case. I'm like, everybody's seen everything at this point, so I don't even care anymore. At that point, they did separate my husband and I because they had to bring me into the sterile operating room and get me set up and make sure that my anesthesia was still okay, which again, I had another incident where they tried to flush with something and I immediately, my blood pressure dropped every single time they did this, you guys. It was like they had to treat me. I think they had to treat me with adrenaline, I think. I don't know, don't quote me on that at all, but they had to treat me with something so that my blood pressure wasn't so low and I wasn't feeling like I was going to pass out and that I was going to throw up. And then I remember they put me on a table. They put me on the operating table, just a random table. They put me on the operating table, and I remember telling the anesthesiologist it felt like my feet were up and my head was down. It felt like everything was rushing. And this woman was like, no, I think that that's probably just your body's last position that it was in before like the numbness really hit your lower half. And I just remember being so uncomfortable because it felt like such pressure from being tilted like this, where my head was down here. How would that not be uncomfortable when you're in surgery or at any point? And come to find out, after the surgery was over, the bed that I was in was broken and the top half was like tilted down and it couldn't stay in a flat position. Yeah, I think I just would take a moment right here and right now. Like, if you guys work in healthcare, I know a lot of times patients can be dismissed for not knowing the correct information. So I feel like in this circumstance, the anesthesiologist was like, oh no, that can't be true. It's probably just how you were positioned when your legs went fully numb. Instead of saying, oh, she feels like she's tilted, let me double check the bed. It was just like, it was dismissed. And I see that across the board in healthcare specifically, where providers and nurses are very dismissive of certain things because they think that they automatically know better. And I think overall care could really be increased if things were double checked, people were listened to, and just some extra care was taken to the communication that's happening. So if you work in healthcare, I just would put that out there as something to maybe put in the back of your mind to kind of think about going the extra step for somebody. Because to be honest, that one thing made it so much worse for me during this C-section. It would have been a huge improvement if somebody would have leveled me out during this surgery. Surgery itself was extremely overwhelming for me. I really had no idea what to expect. I've never had surgery like that. For me and my personality, it was almost too overwhelming that I was awake. Thank God I didn't feel any of the pain, but I felt like the movement that was happening, and it was a lot of what felt like aggressive movement trying to perform this C-section. The provider was so close to me, for obvious reasons, and like it just felt like I was doing this like the whole time. Like they were just like rocking me so hard. It was really overwhelming. I had to ask for my husband to come in the room. Like I had to ask, like, where is he? Is he coming in here soon? Because they told me he was going to be in the room before the surgery even started, and he wasn't. So that was really upsetting and a little bit overwhelming for somebody who's going through surgery. To not have their one support person in there was overwhelming. And again, it was kind of just like everybody else treats it like old hat because they do so many C-sections and they're so used to it. But this is my first C-section and this is my first experience. And it's okay as a healthcare provider, as a nurse, as a tech, to take extra care for someone every single time rather than letting yourself get stuck into this like, oh, this is the same thing, she's just a number. This is kind of where we start to see some of those problems happening. I did talk to them prior to about delayed cord clamping and also about having skin to skin immediately after the C-section. Both of those things were dismissed basically immediately. The provider who talked to me about the C-section said that, oh, they already do delayed cord clamping. But what I found out after the fact is they just cut the cord longer than normal, and then they let that part of the cord continue to absorb into the baby's system rather than waiting the whole time. And I can see where maybe that would be the best thing to do to limit infection or whatever the reasoning might be, but no one explained it to me. It was a very dismissal type subject for this provider. The skin to skin contact was also something that I was pretty devastated about. The baby was taken, up and out of me and then is moved to a table. I asked Donald to kind of go over there and be with the baby. There was no attempt at them trying to do skin to skin. And they said mainly that was because they don't have enough people currently working to facilitate a dangerous situation like that, because you are on a table, you kind of are open to more dangerous type scenarios happening if you're trying to lay a baby on top of you skin to skin. But I see it done and I've heard of it being done all the time across the country, and I just felt like I really got robbed of that, and that it was more so people not paying attention, people not, again, making my concern feel valid for themselves. After I left the operating room, one of the nurses said, oh, did you get to do skin to skin? And I said no, and they were kind of like, oh, like almost like it would have been an accident that I didn't get to do skin to skin. And that's a big moment for someone to just be kind of like, oh, I forgot, sorry. Because of my previous history with my hemorrhage and my bladder function after labor and delivery, my previous labor and delivery, I then went to the recovery room, which is normal, but then the care that they did to massage your uterus was over the top, and I really appreciated their concern for that specific thing. I think that that had a lot to do with my nursing staff at the time, because again, like I told you guys, they went above and beyond in how they tried to help me have progress in my labor, and I felt like those same people really went above and beyond right after my surgery as well, to make sure that I had the least risk possible of having an postpartum hemorrhage. With all of that said, I didn't get to breastfeed my baby for like an hour and a half. And she was like crying during that time and very obviously showing cues of like wanting to breastfeed. That was so hard and devastating, and I just felt like another experience was kind of being pushed to the side. I finally had to be like in the middle of what they were doing, just start breastfeeding and be like, try and get my arm now, like see what you can do now. I gave birth to my daughter at 8:32 in the evening, and I didn't make it to recovery until maybe like 1, 2, 3 a.m. So that's kind of an idea of how long everything was taking for kind of the post-surgery stuff. They do have to watch for a certain time period, certain things, certain symptoms. They do have to massage your uterus every certain time. Also, my daughter was almost 9 pounds, and so they immediately, based off of a certain growth percentage that she was at, wanted to check her blood sugar. First blood sugar was abnormal, but then every blood sugar after that was normal, so that was good. But that was also something that we had to like add in to our recovery process. And that really is where my labor and delivery story ends. Once I was transferred to the mom and baby recovery unit, I got new nurses, a new room, and I was focusing on recovery at that point. So I do plan on at some point filming a C-section recovery video, or a more detailed video about my C-section recovery specifically, because while I was going through it, I felt like I had close to no resources. I did have a few friends and family members who had had C-sections in the past, but the current treatment for C-sections seems to be so different and just continues to evolve year after year, that even though a friend of mine had a C-section like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, the experience seemed very different to mine. So I think it would be helpful and a relevant video to make that for you guys. So let me know if you're interested in seeing something like that. I had to clear some space off of my memory card, which means it is time for me to wrap this video up. If you guys have specific questions about my experience, I'd love to discuss anything further with you. You can either leave me a question down below in the comments, or you guys can always DM me directly over on my Instagram. I will leave my handle right here, and I will also leave a link to it down in the description box. I really appreciate you guys clicking on today's video and watching. No matter what, if you're pregnant and about to give birth, you are going to make it through. You are going to have the experience that you're meant to have, and you are going to prevail no matter what, because you're a badass. I know parts of my story might seem overwhelming or scary, but I don't mean to share them with you guys to be scary. I just mean to share it, to share the real life for what's going on for women in the labor and delivery world currently, because I still feel like we're very behind on where we need to be in regards to care, postpartum care, expectations, interventions, all of that. I feel like we're really behind, and there still needs to be a huge push for confidence in yourself and in your labor and delivery experience, and making it what you want it to be in correlation with safety from your providers. So again, don't forget to subscribe down below if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.